So New York just elected its first Democratic Socialist. Well, what is this mirage of economic populism and can it deliver? Well, here are my thoughts. Let's talk about it. America is standing at an inflection point, one that, to me, in a lot of ways, feels almost existential. For the first time in generations, millions of Americans, especially young people, people my age and younger, simply no longer believe they can make it in this country. They've lost faith in the promise that hard work, discipline, and ingenuity will lead to a better life. For so many, despite all of those things, life doesn't appear to get better. The kind of despair is dangerous, incredibly dangerous, because when people stop believing in the system, they start searching for saviors. They stop trusting the rules and start trusting whoever tells them what they most want to hear. And that's how you get people like Zohran Mamdani, New York's first and newly elected Democratic Socialist mayor. He didn't appear out of nowhere. He's a symptom, a reflection of how disconnected people feel from the American dream. And we can't ignore that. To many, capitalism no longer feels like freedom. It feels like futility. The rent goes up. The groceries always cost more. Wages are stagnant. And the people in charge, politicians, corporate executives, elite institutions, seem insulated from the very real and very obvious pain. So when someone like Mamdani says, we'll fix this by taking power away from corporations, by giving you free public transit, by freezing rents, by taxing the rich, people listen. They don't see ideology, they see relief. And I understand that impulse. It's human. But here's the truth. What Mamdani and others like him, Bernie Sanders, AOC, are offering isn't compassion. It's anesthesia. It numbs the pain temporarily while disease, stagnation, dependency, and decline keep spreading. Let's start by being fair about what democratic socialism actually is. It means the government decides how major parts of the economy should function, what you pay for rent, who can sell food, even which industries get to survive. Economic populism adds an emotional edge. It says the rich have too much and you have too little, and we'll fix it, all by decree. It sounds moral. Heck, it even sounds fair. But it's nothing more than an economic illusion because prosperity doesn't run on moral outrage. It runs on incentives. So what exactly do I mean? Well, imagine this. You own a small apartment building. Maybe it's your retirement plan. You've worked years and years and years. You've saved, you've sacrificed something for yourself, something to leave on to your children, maybe even your grandchildren. And then the city comes along and tells you you can't raise rent, not even to cover your cost. Well, what happens next? You stop investing, repairs are delayed, and eventually you have no other choice but to sell. The next buyer turns those units into luxury condos, and then suddenly there's less affordable housing all across the city. This isn't theory. It's literally what happened everywhere rent control has been tried. In San Francisco, when rent control was expanded, a Stanford study found a 15% drop in the number of available rental units. Berlin's rent freeze collapsed so badly that Germany's high court struck it down. The pattern repeats itself. Price controls shrink supply and raise costs for everyone. Now imagine the city opens government-run grocery stores. Now on paper, it sounds like justice. It sounds like a great idea. Who doesn't want affordable food? Hell, I know I do. But without competition, there is no incentive to improve. The reason to stock better products or control waste. It's just ignored. Venezuela tried it. The shelves emptied, corruption exploded, the slogans survived, but the food didn't. And when the shortages come, the populists always have a new scapegoat, tax the rich. But here's the math. In New York City, the top 1% of earners pay almost half of all personal income taxes. When even a fraction of them leave, the city's revenue collapses. The very programs designed to help the poor start to quickly run out of money. You see, that's the great irony of populism. It's always sold as a plan to help the little guy, but ends up hurting the people who can least afford it. Now, if you're watching this and you're on the left, you might be thinking, Shermichael, you're ignoring the facts. You're ignoring that capitalism has created inequality. First, let's be honest. Inequality has indeed risen, I'll give you that. But let's be precise. Capitalism hasn't failed because it's too capitalist. It's failed where it stopped being capitalist. When big corporations capture regulators, when government picks winners and losers, that's not the free market. That's corporatism. The problem isn't markets, it's monopoly. The solution isn't to replace capitalism, it's to restore it, to make markets fair, open, and competitive again so that you have a shot to rise. Look at countries like India. Before India became a capitalist society, hundreds of millions of people were in poverty. In the 1990s, they decided to change course, and things drastically improved. Look at China. China had almost 1 billion people in poverty. When they decided to open up their markets, by 2020, over 800 million people had escaped poverty. Now, some people will argue the countries that I'm praising, China and India, didn't succeed with pure capitalism. They'll say they used government planning and welfare programs. That's a fair point. But look closer. They didn't grow because of socialism. They grew because they embraced markets. China didn't rise under Mao's communism. It rose after Deng Xiaoping opened the economy in 1978. India didn't prosper through bureaucracy. It prospered when it dismantled the old socialist license Raj in 1991. Yes, governments can build roads and schools, but it's only the private enterprise that can fill them with opportunity. Third, critics will say, what about 2008? What about the corporate bailouts and the market crashes? Isn't that proof capitalism collapses on itself? No, it is not. That's proof of corruption, not capitalism. When banks gamble with your money and government bails them out, that isn't the market at work. That's moral failure. That true capitalism demands accountability, not government bailouts. And if you take the risk, you take the fall. When the rule disappears, so does freedom. Fourth, there's the moral argument. You talk about freedom, some will say. But what about healthcare? What about housing? What about education? Aren't those freedoms too? Yeah, I agree. Everyone deserves access to essentials. But the question isn't whether people need help, it's how we help. A safety net is moral. I'm a conservative. I believe in that. A dependency system, however, is not. We can lift people up without trapping them in programs that simply destroy ambition and punish success. Compassion fails when it destroys the conditions that make prosperity possible. And then fifth, this is one that I hear all the time, the emotional critique. The claim that I'm minimizing people's pain by talking about economics instead of feelings. But I don't minimize it. I understand it. I just refuse to exploit it. Because the socialist promise of guaranteed comfort, it is seductive, but it's a lie. The moment you trade freedom for protection, you lose both. Mamdani's democratic socialism doesn't make life fair. It won't make life better. It'll make life smaller. There'll be less innovation, less opportunity, less mobility. And in the end, everyone ends up equally dependent, except for the bureaucrats running the system. Now, no one can deny that people's pain is real, but the pain isn't a plan. Anger isn't policy, and resentment doesn't pay the bills. The real way to fix this is not to destroy capitalism, but to redeem it, to make it work the way it was meant to. Build more housing instead of freezing it. Cut red tape so small businesses can grow. Reward work instead of punishing it. Let people keep more of what they earn. Because capitalism at its best isn't about greed. It's about freedom. The freedom to create, to fail, to rebuild. The freedom to chart your own course. The freedom to turn ambition into progress and effort into reward. So yes, Americans are in pain. But if we don't channel that pain into productive reform, we'll create more Mamdanis, more politicians selling comfort and control disguised as fairness. And once control replaces freedom, history shows what happens next. Prosperity fades, creativity dies, and fairness never comes. Because in the end, the system that made this country great doesn't need to be burned down. It needs to be believed in again. The $16+ trillion economy that we have, the envy of the world, wasn't made on giving things out. It wasn't made on taking from one group to give to another. It was made on the idea of collective freedom for everybody, regardless of where your start in life began. So for those out there who are looking for hope, Mamdani isn't the way to go. But also for those politicians who are ignoring the pain, you do so at your own peril. You do so at the peril of the country. Because the longer we wait to answer the disillusionment, the anger, the cries of our fellow Americans, the more we push them towards people like Mamdani. And that's a system that I don't think any of us want to live in. I'm Shermichael Singleton. Thanks for watching. Leave your comments below. I look forward to hearing what you think. Take care. And as always, God bless.